Thank you very much, Ellie. That was really, really interesting. Next, we're going to hear from Molly Skinner, the Head of Content at Smartify, and Beks Leary, Senior Content Manager at the National Gallery. So I'll pass over. No worries.
Hi, everyone. A bit of a National Gallery double act going on here. But I'm Beks Leary from the National Gallery. I'm the Senior Content Manager. You might have known me as Rebecca Ellaby pre-marriage.
And I'm Molly Skinner, so I work at Smartify as Head of Content, and we've been working with the National Gallery to establish and produce their audio guide.
So just to give you some context, we actually didn't have an audio guide for about 4 years. It went on pause a little due to the pandemic, and we knew that it was something that audiences really wanted. We knew they were searching for it on our website. We knew that they were asking front of house staff for it. So it was something we definitely needed to offer. We knew it was also going to bring in commercial revenue for us. The thing we didn't know was what those visitors who were asking for an audio guide actually wanted from the audio guide, hence this user research project.
Yeah, so we didn't want to just learn what do people want and what are they picking, but how are they actually interacting with the audio when they take it? So what are they listening to, how much of it, and when are they stopping? The other question that we had was, how does context affect behaviour? Does it make a difference if all the stops are different lengths, for instance? How differently are people taking a tour when there's 15 stops or 30 stops?
So, we basically embarked on a kind of MVP project to release a short number of stops for paintings, which we were going to A/B test and focus group test. We developed content for the paintings, both in short versions and long versions, and kind of offered users different iterations of what they were able to either be served or choose through our first phase of A/B testing. In our second phase of A/B testing, we had more stops, so we went from 15 pieces of content to 13 pieces of content. We had some learnings, which we'll tell you about in a bit, which meant that we were only offering a user-determined option, so they could choose between the short and the long tour. And then we ran focus groups to explore these 4 key audience areas for us. So the Smartify super users, Smartify, people who use Smartify a lot, which by coincidence actually really correlated with our own members at the National Gallery. So those are kind of people who have quite a high affinity with art, probably know who we are already, probably visit us already. And then we were looking at infrequent audio guide users, so people who might have less affinity. And then improving the accessibility of our audio guide was also really important to us, so we tested with those who needed audio description and also BSL users.
From Smartify's perspective, we developed 2 bespoke things for the project that help us kind of present the A/B testing and then analyse the results. So the first one is what you see on the screen, which is the closed web app. And that basically means that when you're navigating to the National Gallery's content, you're not necessarily going through the normal Smartify route. So Smartify is an app and an online platform, and you're just seeing what the National Gallery has on offer. So this screenshot right on the right, you'll see that you can click between the extended or the classic version of the tour, and that's what we're talking about when we say user-determined, because you can pick what you take. The other thing that we did was we developed some bespoke analytics. So we have kind of normal analytics on the platform that let you see how many people are taking a tour, which stops are they taking. But for this study, we wanted to see how are people interacting with audio second by second. So this is an example of one stop, and you can see the second by second analysis. It's really nice. Most people are listening right to the end, which is great. But you can see that kind of like hotspot drop-off point about halfway through, and we're going to talk through that in just a second.
Yeah, so from our phase 1, so that's the 15 stops that we offered kind of different iterations of to users, we found that the most successful was the short tour. So that's the stops that are about 2 minutes in terms of tour completion rates. However, the long tour meant that visitors actually listened to more content. So you have this kind of difference between the short tour, completing more, maybe getting to more paintings, but the long tour actually in time spent, we're listening to more content.
And so then when we looked at our second by second analysis, what we found really is that people will listen to half an audio stop. Whether that's 2 minutes or 4 minutes, pretty much, if they're going to drop out, it's 50% of the way through, which is where the title of the talk, The Psychology of an Audio Guide, comes from, because in that, it's not necessarily the content that is affecting the user behavior, it's just the psychology of looking and saying, I think I've listened to about half. And the key factor that we found that was actually influencing that behavior was consistency. So the short tour was the most successful in terms of overall completion rate, but the long tour didn't come that far behind that. What we actually found was that it was the mixed length version. So those are tours where some stops are over 4 minutes and some stops are over 2 minutes. So ironically, even if you're listening to a tour where every stop is 4 minutes long, you're much more likely to listen to the end of those stops. But if you're listening to some stops that are 2 minutes and you get to a 4-minute piece of audio, you go, I'm not listening to all of this. So that's why for the second phase of testing, we actually removed those mixed length versions and we were kind of focusing on content consistency.
And the other thing that we found interesting in our user-determined option was that, so we were offering 2 named versions. The short version we called the Classic Tour, and the longer version we called the Extended Tour. And users were more likely to engage in shorter form content, but when given their own choice, over 60% chose to take that extended version. But here, the data doesn't really tell us the full picture, because we don't know whether people are expecting from the classic version and the extended version. We don't actually know exactly what they're expecting. So it could have been that from the extended version, they were expecting more paintings, when in fact they were just getting the same paintings, but with longer stops. And it might have just been that people thought, oh, well, I'm getting kind of more for my money from the extended version of the tour. But yeah, that was interesting to find.
So moving into phase 2, we decided to remove the mixed length tours, as I mentioned, and we focused just on 1 tour made up of long stops and 1 tour made up of short stops. The biggest difference, however, is that we moved from 15 stops of artworks to over 30 stops of artworks, 2 minutes. So what we found really that what was the most exciting and the most interesting was that, yes, the short tour still performed the best, but there was a credible increase in people listening to longer stops. And why was that? So the main content difference in the long stops that we created just for this phase was that they included more in-depth looking. So a stop that had more in-depth looking was more likely to be listened all the way through than in the first round of content testing, where we didn't have that kind of additional close looking. So 1 out of every 3 artworks, the long version of the stop actually performed better than the short version, even though the overall tour, it's still the short out for the win.
Yes, and so while there was a drop-off in terms of visitors completing the full tour, because these tours included substantially more stops, we saw an increase in the average number of stops listened to compared to phase 1. And then we don't have time to tell you about all the amazing information we got from the focus groups, but these are just some of our favourite things that we found out. So it was really, we really found that it was something that people felt they would do on their own, which it's not really surprising, because you kind of have to put your headphones in. So we are going to explore what a group tour looks like in the future. People really liked that we had not just curators and art experts, but we also had people like actors, poets, horticulturalists. They enjoyed having different voices, particularly those who were newer to audio guides. And we also offered wayfinding, so like instructions of how to get around the gallery. People really wanted it to be like Google Maps, but we don't have the money to do that.
So the big question is, what's next?
So yeah, we've kind of got a philosophical question to answer as the gallery. Do we want people to engage with more paintings, or do we want people to engage with more content more deeply, but over fewer artworks? That's a decision we've got to make. And also, there's going to be a big question when we're going to use all of these learnings to develop more content now. So from May 2025, when our Sainsbury wing reopens and the whole gallery is reopened, the whole collection is rehung, how will people then engage when instead of 30 stops, there's 60 plus audio stops? How does that change user behaviours?
And then the other question we've been thinking about is, how do we provide a personalised experience? It's the thing that came up again and again and again in the focus groups, in that everybody is different. So in May 25, when we're launching those 60 plus stops, we're also going to be launching personalisation at the National Gallery, which is basically a process where you can take a mini quiz and get your own personalised playlist of stops that have been pre-created for you. And we made a Q&A slide because we didn't know that it was going to be after. So final plug is that Smartify are actually doing some hiring at the minute, including the creative team. So if you want to learn any more about that, come find me later. Thanks so much. My laptop, yes.